It's not 5 o'clock, and they don't care. Welcome to Wine to 5. Entertainment, education, and everyday drinking for everyday people. Your hosts are Valerie Caruso and Stephanie Davis, two wine educators who don't need a clock to know when to pour that next glass.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. I'm Val. I'm here with Steph, and it is warming up outside finally, so we hope you're all about chilling with some Icewine or Icewine or Icewine.
Well, some of you have posted your interest in learning about Icewine, and well, Val and I heard you loud and clear, so that's what this episode is about. We've got an overview of Icewine, and we also are going to be announcing our next book for our W25 Book Club.
Hashtag W25 Book Club.
Yeah.
So before we get frosty and saucy like we do on this show, Steph, I gotta know, what are you drinking up there? What's in your glass?
Oh, I hope I didn't fail everybody. I'm drinking something I haven't had already on the show, but it's sort of a nod to last week's episode because we're actually recording it on the day that it released, which was about Mallorca and those special Spanish islands over there. And so I'm having a Spanish wine that's 100% Garnacha Blanca. So it's a white wine. And this one is La Fou Cellar and from the Terra Alta up there in Catalonia. So sorry to disappoint. I don't have something new. But for some of our new listeners, it is new.
And that is the end of our show for this week. Just kidding.
Oh, no, because you brought it. You brought it to the show, the Icewine.
Well, you brought it to my house and I opened it. So I have the Icewine that, Steph, I don't even know when you brought this. This had to be a couple years ago.
I think one of the first times I came to visit.
I think so.
It was probably when I was trying to show off, Val. I was like, I hope she really likes me.
Oh, stop. You're so funny. You're so funny. So yeah, I think this was one of the very first times you came, and this is the 1996 Ballabach Riesling Icewine from the Olberg Vineyard in the Nierstein village in the Rhine-Hessen region of Germany by Fritz Hasselbach, who actually departed this planet the year you brought this to me. I believe it was 2016 when you brought this.
Whoa.
And apparently he passed that year. So it's kind of cool to be drinking one of his wines because this is pretty special. It's a 22-year-old wine.
Yeah.
Am I doing the math right? Yeah, doing the math right. And you saw the color, right? Can you see the color?
I know. I thought it was a red wine.
Yeah, it's got a beautiful amber color. And it is still... I thought it was going to be funky because when I poured it, it had that amber color. And I thought, This may not be okay. I mean, it was in my chiller or whatever. And I did the Coravin thing. But I could not believe the acidity on this thing still. The finish isn't as long as one would think, but it still has, the fruit isn't as fresh as it would have been. It's not the tangy oranges. It's maybe more like, okay, maybe a stewed blood orange kind of thing going on here. But it's still... You can still taste fruit. You can still taste dried flowers, and you can still feel the acidity tickling your tongue. And I'm like, what? And that is the beauty of this Icewine.
Dude.
And that's what we're going to be talking about today, Steph.
That is so exciting. And now that you use the Coravin and you've got it in your glass, are you going to open it and drink the rest of it? Like you're like, it's time. This cork needs to come out, or just like, save it for later?
I think it's time.
Yeah.
And I think I promised John that he could have some too. So we might just go ahead and if the evening goes that way, I might just go ahead and pull the cork on it because I think it is time. And it obviously has a great aging factor, but I have this habit of letting wine sit too long, waiting for that special time. And you know what? Just pull the cork and drink the stuff.
That's right. When is the special time going to be? That's just kind of this like fantasy I think we all have. But it's cool that it's 22 years old because, like myself, there's a lot of people who are passionate wine enthusiasts, let's say, who collect wine for their kids or their grandkids. And to know that would be a cool, because Icewine could be aged. And we're going to get to that. We're going to totally get to that. And so that's why we're talking about it. We've had some requests, and there's a lot to know, so the where, the how, all of the ice and the freezing, and we're going to go over all of that cool stuff. But it was our lovely Colorado patron, Janet, back in 2017, just last year, that had said, how about you guys have an episode on Icewine? And we really appreciate those suggestions, you guys, because we do have a lot of ideas, and sometimes Val and I are swimming in ideas and proposals. But for our patrons, we definitely want to give you a priority when you have an idea for us. And David in Scotland just so happened very recently to post a hashtag W25 challenge photo of his Canadian Cabernet Sauvignon ice wine. So I was like, this is just getting to be like a snowball, no pun intended. But, it's like, we've got people, Lorelei even commented saying that she loves red ice wine, and her favorite is made from Cabernet Franc. So this episode is for you guys.
So first we're going to kind of get into what ice wine is and where it's from. And like the name implies, it's made with frozen grapes. So the real deal is naturally frozen on the vine. And Germany and Canada are the most well-known producers of traditional ice wine, or the leading producers, I should say, of traditional ice wine. The temperature at harvest is actually regulated by law. So when you're talking about -7 degrees Celsius in Germany or 8 degrees Celsius in Canada, that's about the time the harvesting happens. And it usually happens sometime at night or the wee hours of the morning. But what makes these wines so intensely sweet and treasured and expensive is the way they are made. So what they do is, while these grapes are frozen, they pick them, and it's usually by hand. There are some machine harvesting happening, probably not so much in Germany. It's usually done by hand, and you can see some great pictures of this happening. And because of that, with the grapes being frozen, there's not a whole lot of juice left in the grape to press, because what they do is they extract all that water that's the frozen water, the ice. So what's left is a super concentrated juice goodness, this liquid gold, or depending on, well, even red grapes have white juice, but it's got sugar, it's got acid, it's got these extracts, and this is what is able to preserve the wine later on. But this is why it's so expensive. And what I found was very interesting is that when you're pressing these frozen grapes, you're getting only about a fraction of the juice you get from when you're pressing grapes for regular table wine, like about 15%.
Whoa.
So to put that in perspective, to get 1 milliliter of juice from grapes harvested for table wine, you only need 1.5 grapes.
Okay.
All right, so cut a grape in half, take the half and 1.5 grapes, squeeze it, and you get 1 milliliter of juice. But for ice wine, you need 10 of those frozen, scrunchy, crunchy little grapes in the dead of the dark-ass frozen winter.
Dude,
isn't that crazy?
That's cool. Where did you find that info? I like that.
That was in this little brochure that I have from, I don't know, my glasses on, Wine Country, Ontario, published by the Wine Council of Ontario.
Sweet.
So this is a tiny little brochure on Canadian ice wine.
Yeah.
And it was in there. And I thought, well, that's a factoid and a half.
It is a good factoid.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. But again, like we said, the ripeness level, the harvesting dates, the grape varieties, the regulations, they vary by region and by country, and the names are slightly different too. So when we first started this podcast, I said ice wine 3 times. And the reason for that is because in Germany, ice wine is spelled as one word, E-I-S-W-E-I-N. And they actually say Eiswein. And that is the style's homeland. The history of Icewine is fairly recent. It was first documented even though in the 1800s, but it wasn't until about the 1960s it was commercially produced. And it has its own predicate. I think we talked about the different levels of ripeness before. The Beerenauslese must weight of 110 to 128 oxle, the concentration of the sugars in there. So if you speak Brix, that's about 26 degrees Brix, or a little over 29, in that range there. But Austria also uses the Eiswein spelling. And the grapes there have to have a must weight of at least 25 degrees. And they measure their 25 degrees in what they call Cluster Neuburger Mostweich. the KMW. So if you speak that, you're talking about 25 degrees, where if you were to convert it to the Oxley scale in the German, it's just a little bit less, because the German Icewine is actually starting about 22 degrees KMW. So it's kind of, we'll put that in the blog, because it's like numbers, Val. Yeah, I got it. But just for giggles, if you're doing the math in your head, 1 degree KMW equals 1.2 degrees Brix equals 5 degrees Oxley. And for Icewine, that's a whole lot of sweet, ripe, frozen grape goodness.
Goodness gracious. It is goodness, though.
And in Canada, which is interesting in Canada, because their picking season is between December and February, their grape juice have a must wait of 35 to 39 degrees Brix.
So the highest.
According to this. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking like this one I have right now, remember I said, 110 degrees Oxley minimum. The residual sugar on this is 225 grams per liter of residual sugar.
On the wine that you're having right now?
The wine that I'm having right now. Michael Broadbent, he kind of had some notes on this. 7% alcohol. It is 168 degrees Oxley. 168 degrees Oxley.
Nice.
Crazy.
That is some sweetness.
That's some sweet stuff.
But it's the acid. Everything about it is what makes it all come together.
I don't think it would be any good without the acid. It would just be some cloying, sticky, sweet, coating your mouth. And that acidity just it just lifts it right off the palate. The sweet comes in, says, hey, I'm here. And then the acid goes, and now you're gone.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love these sweet wines.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's also ice wines in the New World, right? So, and you were just talking about Canada. Ice wine is all one word in Canada. Okay, no space between the ice and the wine. It's actually trademarked by the Canadian Vintners Association, so the CVA. And ice wine is really kind of this huge deal there. And because Canada is the world's largest producer of ice wine, all one word. And Ontario produces 90% of Canada's ice wine, about 850 liters per year, and has made it every single year since 1984. But it's made in all the wine regions of Canada. And we shouldn't forget that British Columbia is also a high quality producer. So Ontario is to remember, and so is British Columbia. But the rest of, let's say the New World, ice wine, which is sort of the generic 2 words, no caps, just ice and wine, is also made in Luxembourg, Switzerland, the U.S. You'll see it in the U.S. in New York, Michigan, Idaho, and, there's plenty of other states that make it, but they're sort of more well-known for their ice wine.
And I think it's interesting when you mentioned the red ice wines, because I remember an iced Zinfandel that Renwood used to make out in the Amador County a long time ago, and I actually had to find it at a Whole Foods in Texas, believe it or not. And then there was a Chenin Blanc ice wine that I have from California, or they call it a frost wine.
A frost wine, yeah.
Yeah. And then there was this ridiculous New Zealand ice wine that was a blend of Riesling and Gewürztraminer that I had a couple decades ago. It was back in 2002, and I went crazy trying to find it, but it's not made the traditional way, and you're going to tell us about that as well here shortly. But that brings us to the grapes, because apparently you can make ice wine with any old grape. Yes, you can. So while the traditional varieties for ice wine are high in aromatics, like this Riesling I have here, medium high or high in acid, it also includes grapes like Vidal Blanc, Gewürztraminer, which doesn't have a lot of acid, but depends on, again, when they're picked, Silvaner, Chardonnay, and Cabernet Franc. And in Austria, you can find the Eiswein from Grüne Zweigelt, which is a red grape, and other local favorites as well. So ideally, the grapes are going to hang on the vine through part of the winter. That is, if the birds and the boars don't scavenge them first. I know in Canada, they put out the bird netting.
Yeah.
So while these grapes dangle in danger, they dehydrate, they concentrate. And while it's not just a wild beast that can destroy a vineyard destined to be ice wine, the weather can also be evil, and the threat of mold, hail, wind, and rain is very real. And don't forget the diseases. So the longer the hang time, the riskier things get.
It does sound risky. I mean, it would drive me crazy. I mean, it's a lot of anxiety, I think, for these winemakers and the growers to manage all that. I mean, even if you have these nets on, let's say, to prevent the birds, what about are the conditions going to be okay for the mold or something else, so there's just, or diseases, so it's a lot. The longer it takes, the more you're biting your nails, I think.
No, I don't need that kind of stress. And, in Germany, it's interesting. I remember learning that winemakers get to a certain point when the grapes are ripe on the vines. And when they get to that Beerenauslese level, that ripeness level, they have to make a decision. If they're going to let them, they have to look at the weather. If it's going to freeze, then they're probably going to head toward the Icewine. If it's going to rain, then they're probably going to look at some mold or something like that, if it's not going to. So they actually have to make a decision in the vineyards which way they're going to go. And they make many passes through the vineyard. And that's why some winemakers don't even bother with all that. They put their grapes in the freezer, which is not allowed in Germany, by the way. But these iced or icebox wines, a.k.a. frozen after harvest, they're an optional method for use in the U.S. and elsewhere, but they have to be labeled accordingly. The grapes are picked when they are super ripe, and then they're put in commercial freezers, and then the grapes undergo what's called cryogenic extraction. This allows a winemaker to be in total control and produce an iced wine every single vintage. I personally want to see a wine labeled cryogenic extraction 2016. Yummy. Steph?
I'd buy it. I
would
buy it.
Yummy.
You know why I would buy it? I would buy it so I could come bring it to your house and show you.
I know. And you know what? And that Icewine that I had from the Icewine, I should say, that I had from New Zealand, that's probably the way it was made. It was a Marlborough wine. And I loved it. It was delicious. But what can somebody expect in the glass besides OM to the freaking G?
Well, and I do like how you had just sort of slipped it in. I think that your wine that you're drinking is 7% alcohol. And, ice wines in general are relatively low in alcohol, which is one of the reasons that they make for a nice aperitif or digestif. And I'm not sure if people really think of it in that way. But over the years, I've decided I need to be much better about having lower alcohol wines at the end of a meal instead of ramping it up with higher alcohol wines or spirits. I don't think you're doing yourself any favors by ramping it up. But it is nice to have an ice wine, even as an aperitif. It just kind of, starts the evening. But many times you'll see them suggested as pairings for desserts, with a light fruit-driven type of a dessert or a sorbet. But I'm thinking, maybe it's because it's right around Mother's Day, but ice wine for brunch, right? Because at brunch, or even, late breakfast that's brunch. But waffles or pancakes, stuffed with fruit, apricots or peaches or something with whipped cream. I'm like, wine for breakfast, guys.
Well, yeah, and nobody's calling you an alcoholic when you're having wine for brunch, for breakfast.
Yeah,
it's just like, right. Oh, yeah, but if I'm doing it on Monday,
Yeah. I think it's a new way to freshen up brunch, because if you're going to typically have a mimosa, let's say, this is a really nice way to kind of pizzazz it up, kind of dazzle people or just dazzle your palate, really. But so how would you serve it? Let's say if you're having this brunch, well, you would use a white wine glass, make sure it's chilled. The ice wine needs to be chilled, and just give it some room to to swirl. You don't want a small glass or too small of a glass where you can't really appreciate it.
Yeah, preach, sister. They actually recommend serving it in about 1.5 ounces at a time.
Yeah.
So even though it is low alcohol, and yeah, you could put a straw in this $3.75, it's about a $60 bottle. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You want to, just like you would for a bottle of port.
Exactly.
You want to serve it about 1.5 ounces. Because, and after a while, that much sweet kind of gets to you.
You don't appreciate it anymore.
Right.
So yeah, even though you're not using a super small glass, you're doing a small pour. And what you're going to expect really depends on what grape variety it is, the ripeness level of when it was picked, and the country that it's from. So you can't really say that all ice wines are going to express themselves the same. Mm-hmm. For example, if you had a Vidal iced wine from Michigan, it wouldn't be anything like the Zweigelt Eiswein from Austria. So you get what I'm saying here. But the hallmark of high quality ice wine is the balanced acidity and sugar. You've got focused fruit in these youthful bottles, layers of silky sweetness, lots of texture, and it's just harmonious and very pleasurable. So it sounds amazing because it is, but it's also something you're going to be paying for. You can find, some deals out there or some lower priced iced box, those kind of frozen after harvest bottles that are a little less expensive. But some of the premium bottles start at like $50 for a half bottle. And one more bit before we move on and sum up Icewine is kind of referring back to actually the very, very beginning of the show when Val was opening her 1996 bottle, is the ageability. So we mentioned it once before, but you've got this concentrated sugar and acid. That is what acts as like a preservative. So the ice wines can age a long time, and the fruit may start to fade to the background, and the aromatics are maybe a little less vibrant. But then that's what's so cool, because then it becomes something new.
Right. This one is like peach cobbler right now. I just took the last sip that I have in this glass, and it's had a chance to warm up a bit. And that last sip reminded me of warm peaches with a little bit of like the spice and the brown sugar on it. I'm like, come on. This wine is 22 years old.
That's awesome. That's just
great.
like, dude, that is awesome.
Oh, I know.
I'm so glad that you Corv on that. And now you know that you should be just diving into the bottle tonight.
Yeah, I think that it was a good call. And what we are going to have it with for dessert, I think, are these little, I don't know if you've seen those thin addictives. They look like, they're like really thin cookies. They come in a package of 3, and they look like biscotti. So they're a little on the crispy side, and they have almonds. And this one has cranberries, almonds, and a little bit of lemon.
Ooh, that's going to be perfect.
It is. I was sitting here eating them. And then I have these like guava macadamia cookies that we had gotten in Hawaii. And I had a couple of those from, was it Kaloa Bakery? I can't remember the bakery. But I was just like, oh, this is perfect. So if you have like just a little, like a little fruit-based cookie, a dry cookie or something, yum.
Mm-hmm.
So, or a piece of pie.
Yeah, something light. Yeah, that's good.
Piece of peach pie. Good. Yum.
Yum.
What about Wino Radar stuff? Tell us about the book club, because I already get it downloaded on Audible.
Oh, you beat me to it. Okay, so the new book is Tangled Vines, Greed, Murder, Obsession, and an Arsonist in the Vineyards of California. It's a novel by Francis Dinkelspiel. I think that's how you say it.
Looks good to me.
Yeah, and it was this book is selected by our very first patron, Meg, in South Dakota. And Meg is going to be leading the book discussion in July. So stay tuned for that future episode, and go get yourself the book. Or you can borrow it, from the library or, from a friend. But there's plenty of time for all of us to get into the story, maybe share some comments or opinions,
Yeah. And like I said, it is on Audible, people, so you don't even have to read it. You can walk, garden, drive, fold laundry, and listen along. And I'll put a link in the show notes for that too. So I'm all about the Audible right now. So when you're not listening to a podcast, you can listen to a book and put it on like 1.5 speed. And it's great, man. You can get through the book faster. So there's that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay, well, let's do some Society Wine Educator announcements and reminders, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on with them. The webinars are happening in May and June, but there's one coming up at the end of May on the 23rd at 7 p.m. Central Time, Dishing Up Dirt, Sizing Up Soil by Miss Jane Nichols. So that might be something you want to mark your calendars for. And then, Val and I are going to be at Wine Camp, and that is August 15th through the 17th. And if you don't know what we're talking about, that is the Society of Wine Educators annual conference. It's going to be in the Finger Lakes region of New York this year. The location changes every year. So we hope to see you there. You can still register and come be a part of that.
Speaking of Finger Lakes, they do make ice wine there, and they've got some pre-conference tours to some of these wineries as well. Be sure to check those out.
Cool. Love it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, there is a certified wine educator study site now on the Society of Wine Educators. Unbelievable.
This is brilliant, Steph. Look how far we've come. I mean, first of all, you were my study site back in 2014. And remember the big red fun binder?
Oh, yes.
Do you still have it?
That's how we got it. That's how we passed.
Yeah.
You know, it's like...
That thing was like, and when Jane gave those out, I was just like, oh my God, that long, strange trip that she talks about, that whole thing. That was key to me passing. That thing, not just the study guide, and now they've got the manual for candidates. Now you can log on and get the quizzes, and we got the apps, and we got the study site, and we got the Facebook group. Things have gone crazy in the 4 years since we went to our very first conference and got that big red fun binder.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. And did you see also that in late June, they're going to do a Wednesday and a Saturday, they're doing the Gewürztraminer family?
Cool.
I know, because we just talked about
that's great. We must have been on the same page.
It's
We're all
so
like,
funny.
Yeah.
And she's talking about the mob family of genetic mutations kind of thing. And she didn't say mob family, but, we'll put the link there to that because I would like to get into that. I would like to see what about Gewürz, because whatever you know or think you know about Gewürz, I guarantee you Jane knows something else.
Yes.
That you did not know.
She is a guru, and listen to her. We did, and that's good, right? I mean, they keep coming up with more and more opportunities for people to learn and to access these credentials, and I love it. I love what they're doing. And we also have one more announcement on our Wino radar, and a new wine app is launching. It's called My Wine Society. And we will continue to have more information about it as it gets closer, because Wine 25 will be the first podcast on the app. And so Val and I are very excited to share that with you guys. So stay tuned.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun too, because it's going to be, well, we're not going to tell you any more about it. It's going to be a surprise. Okay. Speaking of shout outs, we want to give shout outs to our patrons. Clay, Andrew, Ashley, who all posted on social media about their new Wine to 5 buttons. I hope everybody got theirs. I've got 2 here that I'm going to give out in person when I see you guys tomorrow. And then, of course, a thank you to our listeners and patrons who suggested and contributed today's episode. Robin Sauls from Girls Gone Grape. She's our Reserva Superiore supporter. Auntie in Georgia retweeting us all over the place and doing some fun tastings down there in Georgia. He's our Reserva supporter. Tenacious Tasters, Jeff E. from the award-winning We Like Drinking podcast. Sebastian of Sassy Italy Tours, who just posted from Boise. Boise, while you're there, go to the bacon bar and get a flight of bacon. Just saying. Bacon. So good. Jen is in Maryland, and David and Lisa are in Illinois, and Anne Marie is in Virginia. And our It's Not 5 o'clock and We Don't Care listener, Steph, who are they?
Meg in South Dakota, who's going to be leading our book review. Clay in Arizona. John, Andrew, and Iswani in California. Chantel in Ontario, Canada, who I bet drinks some really nice Icewine. Mary Lou in Pennsylvania, Kathy in Georgia, Chris, Janet, and Diane in Colorado, Steve and Renee in Illinois, Kathy in Tennessee, Ashley in North Carolina, Sean in Ohio, and our Tastemaker listeners, David in Scotland, Carol in Kentucky, Karen in California, Chip and Katie in Pennsylvania, Danielle and Serena in New York. So you can go to our Patreon page to find out how to be a part of this list, who also gets entered into monthly drawings and gets some fun swag and exclusive content. So that's patreon.com/wine25podcast. And on our website, wine25.com, you can check out any of the other things that we are affiliated with: books, art, travel, clubs, do some shopping, have some fun, check out the links.
Yeah, especially the links from last week's episode on Mallorcan wine, because there's some really cool information about all the Balearic Islands and all their products, the olives and the things. So I really found that a useful site. And if you're going to find yourself over there, you might find it interesting as well. But you can also connect with us every single week between episodes, whether it's on the social spaces at Wine to Five, or we encourage you to join our private Facebook group called the Wine to Five Community. I'm Val. I'm on Twitter at WineGalUnboxed. And I'm also on the Vino with Val Facebook page, in Instagram and Pinterest as Vino with Val. Steph is everywhere. She's online as the Wine Heroine. But until next week, everybody, cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Wine to Five podcast. Be sure to check us out at Facebook/WineTWO5 and tune in next week for more fun and useful sip tips.